let's play the track and then see how that affects the sound. Hi guys, what's good? So in today's video we're going to have a look at drum bus processing. We're going to be looking at techniques we can use to really enhance our drums. Now these processes will be things we'll do once we're already happy with the mix and balance of our drums. We're not going to touch our drum bus until we're happy with all of that. So it's really after that process, kind of those final touches, those finishing things we can do to glue, add warmth, and really bring our drums together. So let's jump straight in. I'm working on a bit of, it's kind of got a disco vibe, it's sort of a minimal disco vibe, this track. I'll show you the loop, and then I want to show you a few tips and tricks you can do to really bring out your drums and enhance them at the end. So let's have a listen. Cool, and I'll play just the drum bus now as well. Cool, so that's the vibe of the track. Now, I'll be completely honest, there's probably a few more tweaks I'd do to probably a little bit at the top end at the moment. And it's really important that you kind of get everything right at first. Before you actually try and add any of these processes, you need to make sure you're really, really happy with your mix and you only do this afterwards. Okay, because if we start adding things on top, we then can sometimes hide or disguise where there's actual issues. So it's really good, even though these processes can be quite fun and they can make the drums kind of instantly sound that little bit better, it's really good to wait to use these tools right at the last minute. So I've got a whole host of things on here along the bottom that we're going to have a look at. Now it's worth saying, often I'll put a high pass filter on the drum bus. What I tend to do is I tend to just set it, and then I tend to just automate a macro here for the on off of the whole plugin. Now the reason I do that is because I find that no matter what you set the resonance, you spent ages setting your low end and getting it just right. And then if you just leave the filter all the way off, it kind of can add like a little resonant bump, and it can just affect the low end slightly. So what I like to do is I like to group it and then assign this here to macro 1, and then I just set it as on or off whenever I want the filter, and then I can do a bit of automation on a second lane there. Now I'll always stick that at the end of the drum bus. Now the reason for that is that sometimes if we're taking out all of this low end here, this could affect how a compressor's working, how a bit of saturation's working. It's going to affect the intensity of how that plugin is working. So all I want this to do is just be cutting off low end. I don't want this to be changing any of the characteristics of the sound. So I would tend to put that right at the end of the chain there. So let's have a look. First things first, we've got an EQ3. Now you can do all of this technique with any EQ as long as you've got mid-side. Now the first thing I'd do is I'd add a slope and I'd add side, and then I'd come all the way up to either 250, 300 and just get rid of all that side information below there. Now the next thing I do, I usually find around 400, 300 hertz, there can be a bit of boxiness in the drums, and sometimes that boxiness can be quite wide, so I tend to take it out but just on the side. So let's have a listen. Yeah. So there's some information there that's just, it's not really necessary that information is really, really nice and wide. Now I'm happy with the mix already, so I don't really want to just dip 400 hertz across the mono and stereo. I just want to take that side information out because otherwise I feel like the drums will lose too much kind of body. So I'm just going to dip that a little bit until I'm happy. Okay, pretty happy with that. It's just cleaned up and that's given a bit more space. A lot of synthesizers, especially if you're mixing your synths wide, a lot of synthesizers can have a lot of information around 400, 300 hertz, and they can often be wide. So it's nice to just give them a bit of space in the mix and allow them the space and kind of take it away from the drums. So the last thing I'll do is I might, again, all side information on this. So again, if you don't know how to set the side, it's just down here. You can choose whether it's left, right, stereo, mid or side you're affecting. But last thing I'll do is I'll give somewhere around 10k, just a little bit of a boost, just to get kind of those shakers and that real high end air. Just give it a little bit of width. Let's hear it without. Okay, quite happy with that. Nice little bit of cleanup. Now I might have a second EQ3 here, and there's some nice presets in dynamic, I think, just in mix. Yeah, if you come to like mud removal and then just have a little play around with the actual frequency. So this tends to, again, this can also get rid of a bit of muddiness, not always needed, but these presets are quite nice to use and then kind of dial in the right frequency. And again, I tend to find with these, they don't take away too much of kind of the body of the sound. They leave it intact. So these presets are quite nice. It's just not the same as if you just did this with a standard EQ8 and you just cut out a chunk. These tend to work a little bit more nicely. Okay, right, the next thing, now this is one of my favorite tricks. It's quite a famous trick and it's kind of exclusive to this EQ. So let's just put this back to default. Okay, so this is Poltech Eq. It's a very famous EQ. It's often used in mastering. There's loads of emulations of it. The soft tube one's really good. I've got the waves one. They all do pretty much the same thing. But basically, it was quite famous because you can boost and attenuate, which basically means cut, the same frequency. So it kind of you can get some really kind of interesting effects out of this plugin. Now let's have a listen to it just on. It adds a little bit of gain. I usually dip it by about half a dB. And it does add a tiny little bit of character to the sound, like a bit of warmth or something. There's some modelling going on in there. So it can just be nice sometimes to just throw over an entire channel just to add a little bit of warmth. But what we're going to do is we're going to look at this low frequency section and we're going to set the low frequency to 30. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to boost and attenuate 30 Hertz by the same amount. So let's give that a go now, and let's play the track and then see how that affects the sound. Okay, so what that does is it creates this really nice warm low end, and it's kind of a really natural boost. Now this is used by a lot of engineers kind of for all genres of music, but with kind of house music and bass heavy music, it just adds a real warm low end, and it doesn't add too much gain either to the overall channel. So that's a really nice tip if your drums are perhaps lacking like a little bit of low end, or they're lacking just a little bit of warmth sometimes, might be described as, but throwing this on can really add kind of that nice warm softer feeling to your drums. Let's hear it on and off again. Okay, what I usually tend to do when I'm thinking about settings is I'll do it until it's definitely too high, so 5 actually sounded quite cool, and then I'll back off a little bit to a more reasonable amount, so you can really hear the difference at 5, but it's too much. And just back off until it's sounding more subtle, but you're still getting that effect. Okay, I'm actually going to leave these off for now, apart from the EQ. Now, again, you can use a combination of these things. I wouldn't use everything I'm showing you here on a drum bus. I'd maybe just use one or two, along with some EQ. But these are just different things you can do, and they have different effects, depending on kind of like the result that you want at the end, whether you want more squash drums, looser drums, kind of more vintage sounding drums. These all kind of play a different role. Now we're going to look at something here for adding, for gluing the drums together. Now it's worth saying at this point that I do usually include my bass in my drum bus. That's because I like to process the low end of it all together, and like I said, I had that filter on there as well. Some people don't, some people do that completely separately, whatever sounds best to you. But this plugin's really, really good, because it allows you to process kind of the high and low end a little bit differently. So this is going to just glue all of the drums together. Now I'll go through it, I'll make some adjustments, and then I'll explain what I've done.